Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is being done or what can be done to help the 71 million unemployed youth around the world? What is one UN agency doing to try to help fill this gap? My guest today is an expert on these topics and on this agency. My guest today is Ms. Susana Puerto. Susana Puerto is the UN International Labor Organization's Senior Youth Employment Specialist. Susana, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate you being with me today. Thank you. Let's get right into it, and we're going to get into some really heavy topics in just a few moments. But what is the role of the Senior Youth Employment Specialist?
Thank you, Bill. Well, the ILO has a very strong mandate on youth employment. Pretty much every day we receive requests from our constituents asking us to support them on how to improve labor market outcomes of youth across different contexts, across different regions. So my work is pretty much looking into supporting research and supporting evidence so that we have a better understanding about what works to support young people, and then using that knowledge to support policy action, interventions, monitoring of those interventions, and in general advocacy so that there are more and better investments on youth employment.
Very good. And you have to have data, you have to have statistics, you have to
Exactly.
see where you're making an impact, where you're not making an impact, and adjust accordingly. Now, you're in town this week for the Ecosoc, the Economic and Social Council, one of the 6 organs of the UN Youth Forum. Basically, what was the purpose of the Ecosoc Youth Forum?
Yeah, well, the Ecosoc Youth Forum is a wonderful platform for young people to come together, youth delegates, governments, representatives, to bring experiences, to raise their voices on different issues that relate to youth development, from health to employment, education, with very particular topics this year around conflict and fragility and how both young women and young men can contribute and be part of the solution.
Now, we've heard a lot about youth unemployment. We see some countries have soaring rates of youth unemployment. Egypt has a major problem. I guess every country to some degree, maybe one way, shape, or form. But what is the reality for youth? I know there are like 2 out of every 5 working youth in the global economy. 2 of every 5 are really working poor or underemployed. But what is the situation as far as the developed countries versus the, not against each other, but let's say the developing countries as far as the youth unemployment?
Well, you just say the figures.
Oh, so that's it?
Let me just
show's over.
Yes. Rephrase a bit. So certainly there are over 70 million young people unemployed. This means that these are young people that are actively looking for jobs but unable to find them. This certainly creates a lot of frustration among young people. And let's say that the challenge is dual. It's a challenge of quantity and quality. So in terms of the quantity of the jobs we need, there is these 71 million young people unemployed, but probably even more importantly, it's about the quality of the jobs. And we have around 152 million young people currently employed, but living in poverty. So this is a great connection with in connection to the 2030 agenda and what is the role of employment in alleviating poverty. So one of our focuses is looking into the quality of the jobs for these young people and how to support them.
Now, is it safe to say, I know we hear of mature societies, mature quote unquote societies. Societies are aging, so to speak. Japan, the United States is one to some degree. Are the majority of the young people who are unemployed, are they in the developing countries, as I mentioned, like in Egypt or perhaps the Philippines or someplace like that? Is that a safe assumption?
It's correct. In the way that the majority of unemployed youth are in emerging economies. What happens in developing countries is that youth cannot afford not to be unemployed. So youth in developing countries actually show the lowest unemployment rates because youth have to work to survive. So, but then the issue in developing countries is the quality of those jobs. So many times young people, because of the need to have a job and to have a livelihood, they accept many different types of jobs that are not decent and adequate jobs.
Exactly. Now, it's often been said, and I know ILO, the International Labor Organization, has on their website and in their reports that you need not one strategy, but you need a multi-pronged approach to deal with this problem and to try to provide assistance. And they've identified 5 or 6 different areas. One is a decent job creation through macroeconomic policies. What are we talking about with macroeconomic, and what are a couple of examples of macroeconomic policies?
Yes. Well, this in fact is a recommendation from governments, employers and workers who came together back in 2012 and issued a recommendation on a call for action on youth employment. So the call for action tells us that there are 5 different ways in which we can tackle youth unemployment and underemployment. So certainly the first one is to make sure that there are adequate macroeconomic policies, let's say from fiscal policies, monetary policies, industrial policies, that will create an adequate environment for job creation. And in particular, when we think and focus on young people, that will create the right economic environment so that young people are able to find jobs that the private sector or that the labor demand is sufficiently developed to and has incentives to hire young people.
So the macro approach is to look at the economy as a whole, as opposed to micro, focusing on a
And
particular
then
industry or something.
The other strategies or the other ways go into more the micro approach. For example, the second area of work is developing skills and employability among young people, developing human capital among young people, updating skills or making sure that there is a strong connection between the skills that the young people bring from school and the skills that the productive sector or the employers are demanding. Then we also, within the recommendation, the third area is...
but before we leave that,
yes.
Is that one way to do it, to have trade schools match employers' needs with students' training
Yes.
programs, things like that, to help, to make sure that there's a good fit there? Is that one way to approach it?
And I'm sure this is a topic you would like to discuss. So yes, within the areas of
programs, right?
Exactly. I'm going there.
Okay.
So within the areas of work of the ILO and many other institutions supporting the transition of young people into the labor market, there are some interventions that, for example, a quality apprenticeship that put the employers in the driving seat. The objective is to prepare a young person with the skills that employers will need. So it's a way of connecting the education system, bringing or preparing young people, equipping young people with some of the skills that they will need, but then complementing those skills that they acquire in education with the skills that they develop on the job. So quality apprenticeship is a crucial type of intervention that has proven success, and that globally we are pushing for more and better schemes to support it.
Exactly. And a minute ago you were talking about macroeconomic policies, talking about fiscal policies, that type of thing, tax laws, tax breaks, credits for businesses, incentives to work to start a business in a certain area. How does that differ from that third one you were just ready to start on a minute ago before I so rudely interrupted you? I apologize. Labor market policies, what's the difference between the two?
Well, within labor market policies, we consider policies that will activate young people. So policies that focus, for example, in people that are unemployed or very disadvantaged young people that need a push to enter the labor market. So within those policies, we have, for example, wage subsidies that do precisely what you were mentioning. They provide incentives to employers, reducing the labor cost so that they can hire young people. Or sometimes is, for example, through vouchers, or other times is reduction in social security contributions from employers. So these are a series of incentives so that employers will hire someone that lacks experience, or through their eyes is someone that lacks experiences, job experiences. So this is one of the policies within active labor market programs that can support that transition and the integration.
There are so many factors that play into this, and one that we hear a lot about, especially recently, has been artificial intelligence, robotization, where you have so many factories that are retooling. It might be a car plant, or it might even be a hamburger place, like a McDonald's or someplace like that, that's starting to become more robotized. They're using robots to do the jobs that people would be doing. that is a major problem for not only adults who may have been on the job for 15, 20, 30 years, but it certainly has to apply to young people too, I would imagine, because so many of them come in at entry-level jobs, and they're maybe minimum wage or below minimum wage jobs. But have you talked a bit about artificial intelligence, automation, robotization, that type of thing, and how it's impacting the ability for youth to get employed?
Yes, and in fact you are going into a point that is of crucial importance to the International Labour Organization today, and is the future of work. So what is going to happen in the future, what are the skills, and what are the changes in the labour market that we need to anticipate, so that both young people and adults are adequately equipped to respond to those new environments. And certainly for young people, skills development is one of the crucial aspects that we are investing on, so that young people are already skilled with anticipating the skills needs of tomorrow, for example. And at the same time, we play strong attention into the quality of the jobs of the future, so the gig economy, and how the gig economy is impacting the quality of the jobs, eventually the lack of having a written contract, or different characteristics that make a decent job.
Now, one of the items you have listed is youth entrepreneurship. How do you work with youth to help them to become entrepreneurs? What do you do in that area to motivate them, to provide resources, tools to them, that type of thing?
Well, the ILO has quite long-standing experience on entrepreneurship. We have done both implementation of programs and research. And in terms of what we do is a comprehensive approach from entrepreneurship education to providing training to out-of-school youth on how to start a business, how to think about your business idea, start a business, and most importantly, if you have a business, how to sustain it, because that's is the risk with youth entrepreneurship. No, there is a great potential, and lots of governments and different organizations are pushing for youth entrepreneurship. But what is critical is to make sure that the businesses that are created by youth are sustained in the future.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website, www.globalconnectionstelevision.com, to view previous programs. Also, we would also encourage you to download the programs. If you're involved with any type of media outlet, be it a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps it's an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a website and you have an interest in our programs, Global Connections Television is provided free of charge at no cost to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. And they certainly will, if not today, then certainly tomorrow. Today we're taking a look at the United Nations International Labour Organization, and also a very important area, youth unemployment. And as mentioned earlier in the program, there are like 71 million unemployed youth around the world. 2 of every 5 youth who are employed are either underemployed or working poor. And my guest today is bringing us up to date on this very important organization as well as this issue. My guest today is Ms. Susana Puerto. Ms. Susana Puerto is the International Labour Organization's Senior Youth Employment Specialist. Susana, we were going through this list, and the last one is the right for young people to tackle the social consequences of the crisis. What are the social consequences and what is the crisis? Unemployment is a crisis, or being uneducated, or all of the above, maybe?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the economic crisis brought together unemployment crisis, and young people were hit hardest by this crisis. Young people, especially in developed countries in Europe, for example, where all of a sudden the unemployment rates among young people grew drastically. So, so talking about crisis, that will be the context. And probably what's important to highlight in what you were reading is that the 5th element of how to support young people in the labor market is making sure that we are also supporting their rights. So it's a right-based approach that accompanies different types of interventions and ensures that young people have the right to participate in negotiations, in collective bargaining, that they will have written contracts, and they will have the opportunity to express their concerns and raise their voices. That's what's crucial. Thinking as well that those voices also bring solutions.
Exactly, that's very important, yes. Now, we've heard the debate over the years, should we have private sector employment, public sector employment? I think most people are in agreement. The ideal situation would be if the private sector could create all these hundreds of millions of jobs, employ as many people as possible, have a very productive economy, but there's a very positive role for the public sector, for governmental agencies and those types of groups. And so often we hear that the government is the employer of last resort. If the private sector can't do it, or if it's something like perhaps infrastructure development or something like that, or maintaining an airport or a highway, that the government is the one that normally does that. Do you get into that debate over private versus public sector job creation?
Well, more than the debate, for us, there are opportunities in every sector. So our direct, as an international labor organization, our constituents are the governments, the employers' organizations, and the workers' organizations, and we work with the three of them, supporting policies and through their actions, enhancing the opportunities of young people in the labor market. If I can just take you from there.
Oh, please, please do so.
Because there is a strong value in public-private partnerships, and the role that both, of course, the private sector plays a strong role as the main employer, and the governments play their role, but what is important is what they can do together as well. So in thinking about partnerships and building alliances, the UN system has launched what is called the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth. The initiative was launched last year during the Ecosoc, under the auspices of the Ecosoc Youth Forum by our Director General, and it's an opportunity. It has been created to respond to a request by the Secretary General to enhance action and impact on youth employment, particularly through country-level action. So, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here in New York. Because in coordinating the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, it's of great interest for us to make sure that we engage with young people, that they are aware that the UN system as a whole is pushing this effort together, and that very soon there will be this opportunity to collaborate and to expand action and to focus on certain types of interventions or thematic areas that will be the priority of the global initiative.
And of course, our viewers can go to your website, www.ilo.org, to get more information about what we're talking about today and all these very important issues. This whole issue of unemployment, youth unemployment, is just so fascinating, and it's so important too, because we often hear that youth who are unemployed can be very destructive, not only to themselves but to the society, and they need to develop skills. They need to become productive members of the society, as we all do. Everybody wants self-actualization. Probably every human on the planet wants it to some degree, but this is such an important topic. Now, I know the International Labor Organization, you're not out doing make-job operations, but you do have projects around the world. What are a couple of those projects, and how do you measure the effectiveness of the projects?
Okay. Let me see. We already talked about quality apprenticeships, so I will bring another example of a project a methodology we designed to support young people in rural areas. So this is an example of a project in Zimbabwe where we went through across the country, identifying different rural areas and then serving young people in those areas through skills development, extensionist support in agricultural projects, entrepreneurship support, and access to finance. So it was a comprehensive approach to enhance the skills of young people in rural areas, update their skills, numeracy, literacy, but also and especially help them to work in groups, creating small cooperatives so that they can improve the sustainability of their agricultural businesses. So that has been quite an important effort. And now that you ask me how we measure success, we have a very strong footprint on impact evaluation, monitoring and impact evaluation. So each of these projects has, of course, its monitoring system, but we select some of the most important projects, or the projects where the evidence base is still limited, and we focus and evaluate them, so that we try to understand not only whether they work or not, but why and how, trying to understand sort of the chain of events that led from the intervention into labor market outcomes.
And that is very important, to have that follow-up and to have the measurement to see where you're being effective. It's absolutely critical. Now, you mentioned a moment ago another very important concept, public-private partnerships. And of course, as I think back to the 8 Millennium Development Goals that ran from 2000 to 2015, number 8 was public-private partnership. And of course, we now have the new Sustainable Development Goals for the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll get it right in a minute. And so anyway, that is also focusing upon public-private partnerships, is it not, to bring the public sector and the private sector together? And we're seeing more of that, are we not? With, I know a lot of the UN agencies are teaming up with private sector people, like Rotary International, the World Health Organization, UN Children's Fund, working on a Polio Plus program.
Exactly,
You
yes,
have
correct.
pharmaceutical companies teaming up with UN World Health Organization, UN Children's Fund, to provide serums and what have you to folks in developing countries. But are we, that is so important to have that, but are we not seeing more of that as we move forward?
Well, we
Not
hope
that it's
yes.
enough.
We hope yes.
Yes, right.
The ILO has, the International Labour Organization has had a great experience working with the private sector, and in this particular topic of youth employment, we have had a very excellent relationship with the MasterCard Foundation, with whom we developed a research project that focuses on studying the school to work transition of young people. So our expectation and our hope is that certainly that we can continue developing this type of partnerships, that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development serves as a platform to facilitate that connection, to improve the means of implementation, because those partnerships will enhance opportunities for the implementation across the different goals. And as I mentioned before, the global initiative for us as the UN system is a unique opportunity to bring all those different efforts together: public, private sector, the academia, youth organizations, media, parliamentarians, different groups that are already investing and working in support of youth employment.
Now, in the last minute or so that we have left, the hardest question,
Oh.
I'm sure that a robust international or global economy would be very helpful. Local economies, the U.S., the European economies, all around the world would be very helpful. But as you look over the horizon, what do you see as the major challenge to help you, or that you have to overcome to achieve your goal, focusing on youth unemployment?
Well, it's hard to pick one, but
there are many, I'm
but
sure.
I think there is something crucial we should be working on, and is reducing the gender gap. Thinking about young women and how we can move young women into a situation where they have equal rights, equal access to jobs, so that they are also equally successful as young entrepreneurs, for example. There is still a very important gap, and it's a joint responsibility to close it and support young women.
And that is so very important. And of course, the Sustainable Development Goals that we mentioned a moment ago, that I think number 5 focuses on gender equity and that type of thing. And we would encourage our viewers again to Google the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to look at the organizations they're involved with, because virtually, not all, but a large number of private sector groups, non-governmental organizations like a Rotary, a Lions International, different groups like that, they're supportive of the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're working on some, if not all of those goals. And of course, our viewers can go to un.org to identify not only what we've talked about today, but they can also look at some of the other issues that the United Nations is involved with. And of course, your website, www.ilo.org. We're throwing out a lot of websites here at the very end.
Yeah.
But again, we encourage our viewers to look into these issues, because they are so very critically important, and they do affect us, and we have to be concerned about the world moving forward, and we all want to create a better world that we can live in, and of course that deals with all these major issues. But Susana Puerto with the United Nations International Labor Organization, I want to thank you so very much for
Thank
a
you, Bill.
very interesting and a very
Thank you.
informative program.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.